La siguiente ponencia es pues, una de nuestras ponencias estrellas, como sabéis. Ha venido desde Seattle Koush, que es uno de los coautores de una de las ROMs de Android más populares, Cyanogen, y nos va a hablar, bueno, ha hecho otras cosas adicionales, como hacks de Chromecast, un montón de protocolos de red, de las que hablará en la siguiente ponencia, pero para ahora nos va a hablar de la decisión de pasar pues, lo que es un proyecto open source, como su famosísima ROM, al mundo corporativo, porque han tomado esa decisión, cuántos son, qué planes tienen de futuro, sus negociaciones con fabricantes de móviles que van a utilizar su ROM como la versión oficial que va a salir directamente con los móviles de la caja. Entonces, pues nada, pasamos a la ponencia de Koush, que viene, como digo, viene específicamente desde Seattle para ayudarnos a lanzar el DevFest de aquí.
Thank you. So I'm assuming he just introduced me. I don't speak Spanish, so hopefully he only said nice things. I do know a little bit of Spanish, but not enough to not completely embarrass myself, so this entire presentation will have to be in English. I'll try to go slow for you guys, so if you have difficulty understanding, I'll try to keep that in mind. Feel free to yell at me if you want me to slow down if I'm just talking too fast. Because I'm a little nervous myself, and like I'm worried I'm going to talk for an hour, and no one understands what I'm saying, right? So that's not good. I heard him briefly mention Chromecast. He actually originally wanted me to come out here and talk about Chromecast, because I did a project on the Chromecast where you could play back a local video from your phone and play it onto your Chromecast. And he wanted me to come out and talk about Chromecast because I've done a lot of development. But then Google released an update that blocked my app from working, so I was like, oh, since Google is sponsoring the event, it's probably best I don't talk about Chromecast. We'll just leave that for later. But yeah, I'm actually here to talk about Cyanogen, which is another project I work on and actually a company I just founded. So a brief history on Cyanogen. Well, let's do a quick poll first. How many of you guys are Android users? Okay, that's good to see. That's good to see. The iPhone guys just head out the door. How many of you guys have heard of Cyanogen so far? Okay, so not as many. How many of you use Cyanogen? Okay, that's better. That's what I like to see. I actually wanted to mention I brought a glass here as well, so if you guys want to talk to me afterwards and maybe take a picture for your Twitter or Google Plus with glass on, it's only €5. Very cheap. So Cyanogen, it's an aftermarket Android operating system. Android is open source, so like I started with Android pretty much 4 years ago when it very first came out in 2008, late 2008. And an open source mobile operating system is like the holy grail of mobile, right? It's never been done before. And I think when it first came out, no one really realized the true potential that was there. And now people are starting to kind of pick it up. So I started working on it almost immediately. And so did the creator of Cyanogen Mod, Steve Kondik, who is not here today, but I'm here in his stead. And we both started working independently on various parts. I released the first hack root for the T-Mobile G1, and a few months later he started working on Cyanogen. And he's a big Linux nerd, so he just like knows Linux in and out. He took the AOSP code and started making his own builds, and he published them on XDA Developers, which is like a big aftermarket community website. And he published the build and he went to sleep, and he woke up the next morning and there were like 1,000 posts, right? It's this enormous thread. Like people were just crazy about this. There's this huge community that really, really wants this stuff. Oh no, tech demo here, failure. Okay, there we go. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I created Clockwork Mod. I founded Cyanogen Inc. I've built a lot of apps, and now I'm working full time on Cyanogen. Anyways, back to CM. He started releasing these builds on XDA, and I saw these, and I was like, oh, maybe I can help out. Like, this is open source. I like open source. And I started doing the builds for the Motorola Droid, which is the first phone in the US at least that shipped on Verizon that really took Android mainstream. They sold millions and millions and millions of units. and that really exploded our user base. So Steve and I got together. He's like, we should really like blow this thing up. And he came up to Seattle and he visited me, and I was like half asleep at the time, and I showed him like this very rough cut of this ROM manager app, and he didn't really get it at the time, but I published it on the market, and like it had millions of downloads because people really wanted to get aftermarket firmware, aftermarket Android operating system ROMs basically, and this was an easy way to do it. So we kept going with the project, and little by little, more and more people started joining, more and more contributors, not just users, but contributors. So we had people that started supporting the HTC Bravo, which is very popular here. We had people support various Samsung phones, like the Galaxy S2, all those different lines. And slowly, our user base grew and grew and grew, and it kept growing. And today we have 8.9, that slide is actually a little old. We have 8.9 million active users worldwide. Maybe around 30% of those are in the United States, 40% in China, and if my math is right, the other 30% is in Europe. So 8.9 million users. And this was essentially with just a bunch of geeks, in their basement after work, just hacking and writing code just for fun. Like we weren't even trying to get users. We were just doing it for fun. And it's interesting because it almost speaks volumes about how bad the other manufacturers' operating systems are, and what a disservice they are doing to their users. And I'll talk more about that later. So what happened was, we have 8.9 million users. We have 3,000 contributors worldwide. And like we never realized that kind of user base, like most startups would kill for that. Like most startups would kill for like 10,000 users, and here we are with 9 million. So we were actually approached by an executive from Sony and Boost Mobile, and he's like, "Hey guys, you realize this is the next big thing? This is better than sliced bread. This is huge. You guys can take Cyanogen and go big with it. We need to do this. Like, you have to do it now. Like, this is the time." And he basically sold us on our own product, which is funny. Like, we didn't, like, okay, sure, I guess we can go sell this. Like, okay. So he's very well connected, Kurt. His name is Kurt. And he took us to Silicon Valley, and we basically spent 2 months on a plane and just pitched like every single VC in the Valley. And frankly, like when we first started, we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what we were talking about, what we were selling. We just went down there and we tried multiple different stories, multiple different angles, and like I think little by little, as we started pitching, we started believing actually what we were selling, right? And that was interesting. Like the story around Cyanogen became more cohesive the more times we told it. Am I going too fast? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm good. Okay. So we pitched for a few months, and finally a couple of VCs decided to bite. Benchmark and Redpoint were the backers, and they said, "Yeah, we really believe the vision that you guys have. We wanna help you guys out and make this huge, because we think this mobile is, $100+ billion industry. If you can even capture a little bit of that, that's a $1 billion company, right? And that's what we were pitching them. We think we can capture just a little bit of that that enormous market, and that's a very valuable thing." So they're like, "Okay, we'll help you do this. We believe your vision. We believe that open source can be a strategic thing, and we believe that a direct-to-consumer mobile operating system is where the industry is headed." So we went professional. We put our ties on, and it became serious. That's like the company mantra now. Like it was all just for fun before, but now it's serious, right? We want to change the world. So we have, we've been, for the last 6 months, I'd say we've been focusing on cleaning up the open source project. We have 4 years of technical debt. Like, we were pretty much running the project and the servers on like shoestrings and tin cans, right? Like, in duct tape. That was holding like the website together. So it was just a big mess that we've been cleaning up, and now we're hiring dedicated engineers. We're getting community support so we can actually help people install it. Now that we have money to pay for these things, we can talk about building actual services instead of just sending software. And services require infrastructure and require capital. And we can start tackling like much bigger ideas than just simple features or small apps, like more end-to-end cohesive experiences, more design-focused stuff that takes a lot more actual concerted effort with a lot of people that we would not have been able to tackle before. And obviously, on this slide here, you can see devices you can buy, and I'll talk more about that later. I'm really excited about that bit, actually. So I briefly mentioned that I feel like the reason we have such traction is because OEMs and carriers are not serving the best interests of the users. If you've ever bought a phone, at least in the US, it's a complete nightmare. So you buy this thing, and it comes with all this bloatware on it, all these apps that you don't want that just like drain your battery and make it hard. Like someone in the US, they have this thing called AT&T Navigator. So you get Google Maps, which is free, and it has GPS for free, but they take the Google Maps icon and they hide it in some folder somewhere, and they put AT&T Navigator on the home screen, and AT&T charges you $5 a month to use Maps. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like, it's a very, very hostile ecosystem for users, I believe, on mobile. In that the OEM is actually selling, Samsung sold like 80 million plus phones last year. The OEM is not selling 80 million phones to you and me. They're selling 80 million phones to mobile carriers. And mobile carriers are actually their customers. And mobile carriers have very different requirements as to what they want on the phones that they are buying. You are not the ones buying the phone. They are the ones buying the phone. So it's very important to keep that in mind. So they'll have a very different set of requirements, and they might not be the best user experience for you or whoever is buying the phone. And ultimately, I feel like what mobile carriers want are to maximize the revenue and the value they can extract out of you by basically turning this phone into a cash register for them, right? So that's what I feel the ecosystem is like. So right here you see OEMs selling to carriers, and the carriers, there you are, this little guy down there that like, oh, here, please take my money and give me something I don't really like. And that's kind of how mobile works right now. So one of the main reasons people use CM is because we are very, very good at getting the latest version of Android onto the oldest Android phones, right? Like you can go get a phone, an HTC Brava or a Samsung Galaxy S. I think those are like 3-4 years old now. They're around when when dinosaurs like roamed the planet, apparently. They're really, really old phones, and you can still run Android. I think we got 4.4 running on it just last night. So, and 4.4 came out like last week. So it's huge. We can do that, and OEMs and carriers don't, and that's because they don't want you to. As hardware starts commoditizing, the carrier doesn't want you to buy or get the latest software on your phone, because if they gave you new software, you would essentially have a new phone, and then maybe you wouldn't go get a new one and resubscribe for another 2 years under contract, and it's just a very messed up scene. So here's how we want CM to work. CM has always been community driven. So we ship our operating system and our software directly to our users, and the users interact directly with us. So it's a feedback loop. It's very cyclical. We get a lot of our best ideas from users, and it's interesting because as engineers, we often don't, I guess, have the imagination that our users do. We think very technically. Our users don't have this barrier of like understanding what is technically possible and what is technically impossible. They'll just submit crazy ideas, and we'll be like, okay, sure, that's insane, but like if we can do that, like we wouldn't have thought of ourselves. If we can do that, that would be an amazing thing to do. So like we get our best ideas, I feel, from our users, and that's really powerful, because having that level of interaction with the users and having the development life cycle that we do, where we can get an idea from a user and it's in a build like 2 days later. That's huge. I think that's really powerful. Not only are we able to stay, essentially like 6 months to a year and a half ahead of the OEM in releasing software updates, we can also get, features, over a year in advance from Google themselves, right? Like we had Screencasting, which, the video recording feature that Google added in KitKat. I did that like a month ago. We had quiet hours maybe 2 years before Google and Apple, we had the swipe to dismiss notification thing. So when you pull down and swipe it away, we had that a year before Google, and then we had, the notification system like 3 years before Apple, right? So I don't know what they're doing. So that's what this is all about. We believe that the user can choose should be able to choose the software that they want to run, and they should be able to choose the software that they don't want installed out of the box. We believe that bloatware shouldn't be something that you accept as a user as part of your mobile experience. That's not an option for us. So I did the pro. Let's see it again. How many CM users? Okay. How many of you guys tried to install CM and failed? So that's really bad. So that's one of the main problems that we recognized. If you've ever tried to install CM, I'm going to, off the top of my head, try to recall how it works. You have to figure out how to root your phone first, which varies from phone to phone, and there's like 200 different Android phones. You have to go download a recovery image and flash it. Oh, first you have to unlock it, and then you have to flash the recovery. Then you have to download the CM for your phone, and then the Google Apps for your phone, and flash all that. And that essentially loses like maybe 500%. For every one user that we do get to install CM, we have 4 or 5 walk away because of how hard and crazy the install process is. It's absolutely miserable. And that was the number one thing we needed to fix. So you can see here, this is our Jira instance. Jira is a bug tracker, where Steve created a bug that says CM cannot be installed on every device with one click. And that's the vision. And then he assigned it to me, and I'm like, why did you assign it to me? I don't want to do this. And the description says, my mom should be able to install CM on her phone with one click, right? So that's a very lofty goal. Like we want people who are not technically minded to be able to install this product with as little friction as possible. Oh, here's the wiki on how to install CM. That's page 1. So there's more. It's an absolute nightmare. So like I said, I'll keep going back to this. It really speaks volumes as to, I feel, number one, how great a product we have, and then how bad the OEM product is. If people are willing to do this to install our stuff, right? That's crazy. And Sid is not happy with how difficult this is. Sid wants this fixed too. Sid is not amused. So here's how we're going to do the CM installer. Our first version of the installer, we did it entirely with the desktop app that ran on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it was running. It just as this desktop app. You plug your phone in, and it would walk you through the steps of enabling ADB. And we had one of our advisors come in. And he was a very technical guy. He used to be a former VP of Amazon, and he's an iPhone user and a Mac user, so he really knew nothing about Android or Windows, which is what we gave him to install it on. And he plugged the phone in, and he couldn't figure it out. The first version of the one-click installer, and he just like tore us apart, right? Like Steve and I like left the room crying. We were so sad. We had been working on this for 3 months, and he just like completely demolished what we thought was a great thing. And we're like, oh, okay, so we have to. But like I said, users give you the best feedback, right? They take the essence of what you're trying to do and like basically distill it down into something that you wouldn't have thought of yourself as a developer, because you wouldn't be able to make that mental leap to this, I guess, more insane concept. He's like, well, why don't you just have it installed from the Play Store? That's what he told us. Why don't you just have it installed from the Play Store? And we're like, you can't install a ROM from a Play Store, right? That's impossible. Like, how would you do that? So then we're like, oh, maybe you can. Maybe you can have it walk you through the hard parts and then take you to the Windows side. So this is what it actually turned out being absolutely brilliant. He was 100% correct. So we have an Android app that you install via the Play Store. It'll walk you through getting ADB, which, if you're familiar with Android, is basically how you connect your computer to your phone. And most users, they can't get to this part because you have to go dig through settings and then click this one place like 10 times, and then go to development options and stuff. It's crazy. And anyways, once you get that set up on the Android side of things, it'll then direct you to the Windows side, where you get your one button and you click install, and it just handles everything for you. So if you need to unlock, it'll unlock for you. If you need to flash a recovery, it'll flash that for you. And it's very, very simple. And here's the, so it detects your device, it figures out what you're running, and then it gives you the button. And it wipes your phone out, and when you, after the install completes, like 5 minutes later, you'll have a brand new mobile operating system. So when we made this announcement, there was a significant amount of community concern, right? Like, you've taken this open source project that hundreds and thousands of people have contributed to, and now you're turning it into some sort of corporate interest. Same thing happened with Red Hat and Fedora, right? How is this going to work moving forward? Like, is the company just going to take their source and take their toys and go home and never contribute back? And that's kind of one of the things I want to talk about today. That would be, taking our source and going home would be like the worst thing that we could possibly do as a company. We believe that our users are integral to driving this forward because of the feedback that they give us and the testing and the advocacy that they do for us, telling their friends about CM and getting their friends to install CM. This is really, really important. And we never want to get into the position where we end up having to take this community project and have that be an upstream for a pro version, as we're calling it, of our own proprietary stuff. So what we're going to be doing is, on the community project, we'll be adding various APIs and platform enhancements that anyone can use, even people from the community. So if, for example, like I've been working on an AirPlay mirroring thing where you can take your Android and AirPlay mirror your screen to an Apple TV. Like, Google will never write that, but we will because we don't care. It's a really cool project. But I built out APIs into the platform that's open source that anyone can use. So if someone from the community wanted to write screencasting to a Google TV like over there or to a Chromecast, they could certainly go do that. And then I built on top of that to build out the AirPlay extensions, which we're going to keep proprietary, for example. So I believe that's how open source can work strategically. You can add value to the project while also retaining value for the company itself. So back to the Community and Pro Edition. The Community Edition is basically exactly what we have now. Like most of the people that are in the community, they love hacking their phones. Some of them are even developers. So we want to keep as open and hackable and pluggable a system as possible. So it's going to be pretty much exactly what we have now. It's going to be user debug. It's going to be signed with the well-known test keys, which has some security concerns. Root will be enabled, as it always has been, and the community will essentially drive the project in both not only contributions but also the feature ideas, etc. And we'll have the same CM updater as before. And the Pro Edition is, that's not the final name, that's just what we're calling it for now, is what the company will be building. It's going to be using the Community Edition as an upstream. So we are not going to have like some of our own internal fork of the Community Edition by any means. And it will be designed for security, so we want to close like the various security holes that are involved with releasing well-known keys into the wild. It's going to be the user builds, so the private keys, as I mentioned. And as we grow our user base with this one-click installer, like if we're having very non-technical people installing Cyanogen mod, we have to make it ultimately a lot easier to use. So we need a simplified automatic updater, similar to what Google provides on the Nexus line, or the Samsung does well. Root will be off, but we are making it really easy to enable if you want that. And the release cycle will also be much quicker, so once every couple weeks. So I talked briefly that we're focusing on building various services. CM Account is the very first one released. It's actually going to be the underpinning of the services that we're building. So out of the box, CM Account has a device management web interface. So if you log into your CM account with your various phones, you can see on the website the various phones that you have installed or have set up, and then you can locate them, remote wipe them, you can ring them if you want. You can also do backups of your data and sync data between devices. That's still internal, but we're going to be rolling that out soon. And the cool thing about the device management stuff and the device location stuff is that how many of you guys use Lookout or the Google Device Manager stuff? Have you heard of Lookout? No? Lookout? So most services that implement this stuff, when you try to find your device, they send the device location up to their service in the clear. So Lookout, for example, or Google, for example, could, if they wanted to, I'm not saying if they're going to do this, they could potentially know the location of your device at any time because there is no extra authentication beyond to validate it's actually you versus the service. So we've built this in such a way that only the user can request the location of the device. So even when the device location passes through our server, it's encrypted with a secret that is only known to the user. So essentially what's happening is that the server is serving as a router for encrypted traffic between the user's browser and the user's phone. And that's actually very similar to what we're doing with our secure messaging. So we have deniability, I guess, is what I'm saying, in that if the NSA comes knocking on our door and they're like, we want to tap your servers and get all those device locations, we can actually say, I'm sorry, we can't do that because it's technically infeasible for us to do it. And I think having that level of deniability is very important given the current climate. So what else is coming on the service side? We're building recent conversations, which is a people-first approach to doing messaging. So I use a lot of messaging apps. I use my SMS, I use Hangouts, I use Facebook. I also use Google Voice. And I don't want to have to dig through every single app to find out where I was talking to someone, because that doesn't really mean anything to me, what app I'm using to talk to someone. What's meaningful to me is who I'm talking to, right? Like, I just want to go find a person, click on them, and then have it take me to wherever I was talking to them. So that's our take on this. This is actually an engineering prototype where we have a live folder on the launcher, and it shows your last 9 conversations that you've had with people. You can see if I went and clicked, if I went and clicked Henry or something, it would take me to the messaging app. Or if I went and clicked Stacy, that would take me potentially to Hangouts. It would go back to the app that I actually initiated the conversation on. And it's sort of abstracting out all the various providers that you may be using to converse with people and making it more meaningful user experience for you versus a better experience for whoever's providing the service. Like Facebook, they released their Facebook Home, but no one uses it, right? Like, no one uses Facebook Home because no one's life revolves entirely around Facebook, right? So I think that's what we need to realize about users. Like, users use a lot of services, and we want to provide access to all the services in a meaningful way. We're also building secure messaging, which is our take on iMessage. If you've used iMessage works such that if you send a message from one iPhone user to another via their text messaging class or their text messaging app, it will potentially go through the Apple servers and not through SMS at all. And this is really cool. In the context of CM, we hijack the messaging app, and if you're sending messages between 2 CM users, it goes through our servers. But like the device finding stuff I was talking about before, we can't actually see what's being sent from one user to another. It's using point-to-point encryption. So if I message Steve and Steve messages me and it goes through our CM server, no one knows what's being said besides Steve and I. And that's really important. Like, I feel like a lot of our privacy and security has been lost because we're willing to give it up in the name of security and convenience, or ease and convenience. Like, and I think it's possible to do proper security and privacy by just building it right and have it still be convenient. And that's one of the things we're focusing on. Universal screencasting. I've talked about this a couple times already. Screencasting to a Roku or to an Apple TV. Or if I have a video of my dog or something and I want to send it to my Samsung TV or my Xbox, I can do that. And we're also doing themes. So one of the big selling points on CM is that you can make it look however you want to. So we've actually had guys that A few weeks ago I was in Austin for the Android barbecue, and someone took out his phone and he's like, look at this, and then he goes into the theme manager and he makes his Android phone look exactly like an iPhone. I'm like, why would you do that? Like, he was pushing my buttons. But like, people, it's ultimately all about personalization. People want to do really cool things with their phones, and we don't believe that our brand and our design should ultimately, dictate the user experience that the user may want. The user may have their own vision. And so we don't like want to push touch widgets on anyone or sense on anyone, or even the Nexus experience. Like the user, if they want to go build their own themes, they can do that. And so we're building a really cool theme engine. We're building tooling to make it really easy to create themes via a web browser. And then on top of that, when you're in your browser, you can just publish the theme straight to the CM store. So anyone who wants to go get your theme can just go get it really easily through that same store. We're also building a better gallery. So you guys have probably seen the Google Plus Photos thing, which is like Google's take on the gallery with the Picasa as the back end. And I was talking about Facebook earlier, right? Like nobody uses just one service. Like most people have multiple services. Like I store my photos in Dropbox. I store them in Picasa, and I also have people that tag me in Facebook. I want to be able to see all those photos in one app, in one meaningful experience that's really, really tightly integrated and doesn't, let me turn that back on, and provides a really nice user experience. So we're building a new gallery that does exactly that. Hopefully, I can show you guys a demo later on if you catch me after this talk of what we have right now. But right now we're supporting Picasa, Flickr, Facebook, and Dropbox. And all in one really slick user interface that groups it in a better format than what the AOSP gallery does, which is like this fire hose of stuff that doesn't really organize very well. And then obviously we are going to be writing a new launcher. So there's been a lot of takes on launchers, but few of them come close to what our vision is. I can't really talk about that much right now, but we do have some crazy ideas around a new launcher. And finally, hardware. Steve and I have been wanting to do hardware since pretty much we started the project. Like hardware is ultimately how we're going to go mainstream. We are partnering with Oppo right now, and Oppo is a high-end phone manufacturer, or high-end basically electronic manufacturer in China. And they've done Blu-rays and DVD players in the past, and they're just now starting to get into phones. They've released a Find 5, which is a really, really great phone. I would say it's like on par with the HTC One, which is what I'm carrying in terms of hardware quality. And we're slated to ship a phone with them at the end of this month, actually, the Oppo N1. And this is a crazy phone. This is like the size of a Galaxy Note, and it's got this camera up here, a 12 megapixel camera that you can flip and rotate. So like if you want to do like the Facebook selfies, right, you can just flip it and then just like take a photo. It's really neat, and get a really high resolution photo on a selfie. It also has a back touch panel back here. So if you need to scroll through a list, you can just use your back finger, one hand scrolling. It's pretty sweet. And it's going to be the first phone shipping with CM on it ever, and I'm super excited about that. And there's actually going to be more of this to come in the near future that I can't really talk about, but I'm super excited about. So yeah, that's where CM is going. This is really exciting for me, and I hope it's exciting for the community as well. And I wanted to say thanks to everyone that's been supporting us over the years. We're very heavily hiring, so there's our email address if you're interested. I think that's my last slide, so I was hoping I could take some questions from the audience. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll answer your first one first so I don't forget it. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's been two new features that have been put into Android for the purposes of security, and they're good features. They're not, I wouldn't say they're targeted at CM. One of them is SE Linux, which basically makes it harder for you to root your device. And the other one is DM Verity, which validates your system image after the device boots. So DM Verity is not really that important to CM because CM will replace your entire system image and the boot image. But DM Verity does make it more difficult for, I believe, like if you want to run Samsung TouchWiz plus root and then add some stuff into the system, I think that might not work so well. I think you might have to replace the boot image or something like that. So that does cause problem for like aftermarket ROM or rooted ROMs, but not so much CM. SE Linux is kind of the same. If you can replace the boot image, it's still fine. The thing that concerns me with basically these devices being locked down, it's not so much the OEMs. CM has very good relations with the OEMs like HTC and Samsung and Sony and Oppo. They all really, really like what we're doing. They want to get the enthusiasts on their hardware. So they try to maintain relationships with us. It's actually the mobile network carriers that aren't a big fan of us. So particularly in the US, there's carriers like Verizon and AT&T are actively looking to lock down bootloaders, which makes it not only hard to root, but also hard to install CM as a result. So I wouldn't say that the changes Android made in regards to DM Verity and SE Linux are an attack on CM more so than the policy is being enforced by the network carrier.
Yeah, I have to stop there. I got connected with Verizon for a while. So.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So second question, kind of related. Will you be able to install CM in the future in other non-Android phones? Like if I had a Windows phone or an iPhone or a regular phone, will I be able to install there CM?
So it's funny. I'll tell you a funny story about. I went to Andreessen Horowitz, which is a venture capital firm in Palo Alto, and Steven Sinatra, the guy, former president of Windows, he's now a partner there, and we showed him the CM installer, and I could see like the gears ticking in his head, like Microsoft could use that to actually gain market share, right? Like they could have a Windows Phone installer for Android phones. So it was something that he brought up. I was like, I don't think anyone would actually want to use that though. Like, whatever. But sorry, what was your question again? I got distracted with my own story. Uh-huh. Oh yeah. I think that's possible. So like I know that's actually been done with a Windows phone. It was actually a Windows mobile phone, but it should be possible with Windows Phone as well. I know that Microsoft has further Windows Phone devices. They've asked that their OEMs heavily lock down the devices so that they can't be tampered with. So it might be a bit more difficult, but it should be possible. They're all running the same hardware. Yep. Any other questions?
You said earlier that carriers demand manufacturers some kind of things. How will you manage that with the new Oppo?
We are selling the Oppo devices direct to consumer, so we're not selling through a carrier. We're not going to be, we're not going to be beholden to any carrier demands in this case. The downside is that the U.S. is very heavily subsidy driven, in that if you buy a phone from a carrier, they'll like knock like $300 or $400 off the price. So it makes it a little difficult to compete on price with, if we're selling a phone, but we have some ideas around that. Any other questions?
How many people are you employing?
So right now we have 4 in Palo Alto. We have 12 in Seattle, and then we have 1 guy in Portugal actually. Yeah. I know that you had some questions from last night that I told you to save.
For the next
Okay. Okay. Cool. Anyone else? Oh, okay.
What about the pricing?
So the Oppo N1, I think we just announced pricing. It's $599, which is for a 16 gig model, I believe. But we realize that we are essentially competing with the Nexus here, so I will hint that we are looking at a $300 device pretty much at cost, better than the Nexus 5. Next. Cool. Anyone else? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, maybe it's not a good question. I'm talking as an ignorant, but are there any concerns with open source licenses to make it the pro edition?
No, not really. We have so the licenses are primarily Apache in user space, which is very very business friendly. We don't have any licensing concerns that any OEM or carrier would, right? It's all Apache, and then the kernel is GPL, so it's very business friendly.
Talk about services. I'm wondering if there is going to be any difference between the community edition of CM and store edition of CM, and what type of services they are going to be able to work with.
The services will be available on the Pro Edition. They probably won't be on the Community Edition because we want to keep that as open source and pure as possible. That if we're going to put proprietary bits on it, it wouldn't be right to put that in the. If it wasn't open source, it wouldn't be right to put that in the Community Edition. But that said, I mean the device location stuff. The CM account is open source, so we did put that in the Community Edition. But there might be future services that are just for Pro. I think someone here.
What about Google Apps licenses?
Good question. He asked, what about Google Apps licenses? So currently the installer right now will back up your existing Google Apps packages and reinstall them. So we're sidestepping the issue at the moment, as we always have been. But with Oppo, we are going through the process of actually legitimately licensing Google Apps. So that means we're going to go through CTS, which is the Compatibility Test Suite, which basically means that you're not breaking Android in terrible ways that would break apps that you download off of Google Play. And then we're also going through CDD, which is, they look at the device itself, the physical device, and make sure that there's nothing just absolutely like crazy about it, like the battery doesn't explode or the flashlight doesn't turn on and burn a hole in your pants or something. Cool. So there's going to be a line for glass photos, $5 a ticket. Thanks, guys.